Hi, my name is Phil Metzger, and in 1992 I moved to Moscow, Russia. From there I lived in the beautiful Central European country of Hungary, where my family and I spent the next 20 years living, learning, and sharing about Jesus. Different foods, culture, and language, but underneath it all, we discovered the most amazing people. We learned that to share the gospel effectively, we had to adjust. We had to cross cultures. Now we're back in the U.S., and we're discovering that this country is a melting pot of culture. This show is committed to helping Christians connect to those who think, believe, and live differently than them. This is Crossing Cultures. Well, thanks for being with us. In this episode today, we are going to talk about the importance of listening. So this is my buddy Nick Roach. Nick, thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Philip. Good to see you, man.
You too. And we've been having way too much fun doing this so far. And so listening is what we're going to talk about. Listening is one of those things that I think everybody believes we do. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, in order to have conversations, I listen. But somehow, and especially because our kind of overriding theme right now is Christianity, culture, and race. We're focusing in on especially relevant issues that I don't want to say dealing with, but that are important for right now. The world's eyes have been opened up. America's eyes have been opened up. Right. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to get closed again. Mm-hmm. As a white guy, I don't want them to be closed. Mm-hmm. My eyes are opened. I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning. But if I don't learn to listen, anything I'm hearing is not going to it's going to Teflon. It's going to just bounce right off of me.
It's good. Yeah, once you care. We want people to care. But
yes,
if you can't listen about what you're trying to get involved in,
exactly.
You get stuck at some point.
Exactly. And so, this whole podcast is dedicated to bridging the gaps between people who live, think, believe differently than I do or than I as a Christian do, and that respect begets respect. I don't need to put a wall up because someone is different. I can use that as a point of engagement. Yeah. How can I learn about who you are? Because as we already spoke about in an earlier episode, that we're all made in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And I benefit by who you are and the way that God made you. I become better because I'm learning about who you are. So today, the importance of listening and how it impacts each one of us. I want to give a quick definition to what listening means because I think it's easy to assume, and that's the last thing we want to do on this podcast is just make an assumption and then have people thinking differently. So listening, the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in a communication process. So let me break it down. Communication only works when we understand each other. When I hear your words, but I don't understand their intention, then I didn't actually listen. Yeah. I heard things, but it's not transmitting into information that creates connection and relationship. And we were made for relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
And I know you and I both have experience in learning another language. Nick is amazing. This guy... He comes down here and he starts learning Spanish, and the dude speaks Spanish like nobody's business.
You're fluent in Hungarian.
I mean, but I spent 20 years there.
I mean, hey, there's a lot of people here that don't speak Spanish.
Listen,
they've been here for longer.
You're right about that. I mean, but you're a football player. Football players aren't supposed to be so smart.
There's no generalization there at all.
This guy is so. I'm so truly blown away. But one of the things that we both then learn in the perspective languages that we are learning or have learned is that we have this phrase where we say, you know enough of the language to be dangerous, right? So you learn words, you learn even the grammar, and you can put those two things together, but people could be talking to you. You have no idea. You know the words, you know the right grammar order. And I'm sure this has happened to you in Spanish. It happens to me. I can't count how many times in 20 years in Hungarian where I heard the words and I had to actually learn to say this. I understood every word you said, but I don't know if I got the meaning of what you're talking about in the slightest. And I know that's something that, I get to watch your journey as you're learning a new language and becoming so proficient in that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. The hardest part for me, honestly, was... Well, first of all, I came to realization very quick that I was most dangerous in English.
So true,
all the dumb things that I had ever said and the worst things I ever said were in the language I'm supposed to be, a professional or a master at. So, but in terms of learning the language and like thinking about listening as a skill, I was really caught off guard about, it's been almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. So like 6 months in, you know, I was learning stuff pretty quickly, and I was happy with my progress of being able to, you know, express myself and say things and make sentences. But I hit this wall, and I was like, it was really unexpected because I realized, you know, the class is all about going out and getting in conversations. You know, you got to practice.
Right.
You actually have to be in a conversation to learn how to speak.
That's how you learn.
And so I'm going to go, and I have this desire to be in conversations, but I was so horrible at comprehending that I couldn't even be in a conversation. And so it was
you could only like say your part.
Yeah, I could say my part, and then just be like, you know what I'm saying? It was horrible. And so, but it sunk in very clearly in that moment. I was like, yo, I will never be good at building relationships, having conversations in this language if I don't learn how to listen first.
Wow.
And then I was like, wait, what? I was like, that speaks to way more than just trying to, you know, get myself into Spanish. So
there's a message there.
There's a message there. But it was this really like bright, you know, flashing light. Like, yeah, bro, listening is important. So it was literally, though, I had to sign up for a separate course on the side that was specifically geared toward understanding native speakers.
Wow.
So that I could continue to progress with my spoken Spanish. You know, so it was like automatically, you know, anything that I wanted to say had to submit to whatever level my listening was at.
Right.
You know,
you can't outpace your listening.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think that just taking that lesson into these conversations is like, if there's any part of us that wants to devote a percentage of our effort into the conversation, like if you want to split it between listening and speaking, it's very evident which one should be more. Of course, you know, Scripture supports it in many places too, but it just, I had such a, you know, a real life like off guard roadblock that popped up that I had to address to go forward.
Right.
There was no way around it.
Right. It'll literally become a wall that you'll never get over if you can't grow in listening. But a lot of people, and I kind of want to go back to what you said about like English being because I think that's really important, is, but I wanted to just mention like the idea that like, you know, we can learn all the words, we can learn all the things, we can, but it becomes monologue. And then, you know, and here's the other danger, right? And I'm sure knowing you and knowing how proficient your Spanish became so quickly, you could have you could have a monologue and your ability to speak is outpacing your ability to understand. So people are going to assume you understand more than you do. Right. And then they're going to judge you based on what they assume you should already know based on your ability to speak.
And here's the other thing too, Phil, like you just were mentioning a minute ago, even in those conversations on the outside, I heard everything that they were saying. You know, I heard the sounds of their voices and their words, but without the comprehension part of the listening, what did that give me?
Yeah, it's we know enough of the language to be dangerous.
Exactly.
You know, so, I mean, I have been to so many. You know, I realized like in Hungary where I was living, something wrong with the car, which was always the case. You know, I take the car to a mechanic. You know, and I don't know the words in English. You know, I could barely make the sounds, and then you discover in other languages the sounds they make for that is different. The dog doesn't bark like he does in English, you know. And so I would, I'd be like trying to describe, you know, this thingy over here is making this sound, and I could just see their faces like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, seriously, what is wrong with this? And then I discovered moving, back to America and going to a mechanic, I don't know what I'm talking about in English. And you made a really interesting point about English, and I want to bring it into this kind of idea of like this, everybody's kind of trying to be enlightened to this idea of like, we need to learn and we need to grow and we need to understand. I need to understand I need to understand a perspective that I've not given enough thought to. A Black perspective. Yeah. I haven't given enough thought to that. So now you got a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about, trying to talk about it and saying the wrong things. I mean, there's been kind of famous cases of, I can think of like white Christian guys trying to have this conversation and it almost like their ability to communicate has outpaced their ability to listen. And so they're saying words and people are judging them on the fact that they should be better at this. Right. When the truth of the matter is they're just really good communicators, but they haven't listened enough and understood these conversations. Right. Is that a fair thing to?
No, it's really good. I think of two things, like being a good communicator doesn't necessarily mean good relationship builder.
Not at all.
Which is obviously at the core of what we're trying to do as believers. And then also thinking of like when Jesus wanted to come in, in any multitude of ways that he could have picked to save the day.
Right.
When you look at scripture, even when he was going to miraculously heal somebody, before he would do anything, he asked them what they wanted or what they needed, or, just giving them the dignity of being able to speak for themselves and humbling himself, having all power.
Yes.
Humbling himself enough to be patient with them and really, tell me what your issue is. I'm gonna listen, and then I'm gonna act accordingly based on what you tell me.
Right.
I'm not gonna act based on what I assume you need or what I think that would be good for you.
And isn't it funny, because like when we talk about Jesus, he actually did know what they were going to say.
Right.
And yet he still took the time
let him say it.
to let him say it. Where so much of what's happening right now, and it's, we say right now, but it's always been this way, but we feel it right now in a very, kind of think we're all sensitive to so many conversations that are happening. It's like, talk, finish so I can say something, finish so that I can say something. And I'm hearing, but I'm not listening to you. I'm just finish what you're saying so that I can say my point.
And you know what, Phil, just to make another point off of what you're saying about, like, a lot of people are saying a lot of things, and there's a lot of screaming and yelling on both sides, I think. And from what I know, you know, having a bunch of kids that you raised and having 5 little kids in the house for us, screaming usually doesn't happen until there are a few instances of not feeling heard.
Right. Wow.
So we have to go and talk our kids down emotionally, like get them to relax themselves a little bit. But usually they start getting riled up and they start having to feel like they have to yell because their sibling is not listening to what they're asking.
Parenting 101.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think that's just, we are no different as adults.
Right.
When if we go for a while and we feel like what we are trying to express is not being received, eventually we're going to change the delivery. And I think that, Dave Chappelle said it really well in his special about everything that happened, where, he said the streets are just talking.
Yes.
The streets are speaking for
that.
themselves.
Yes.
Right or wrong, that's a different discussion, but just what you're seeing is the voice of the streets crying out.
Yes.
And so,
even on that, I'm thinking about that same episode, that same thing that Dave Chappelle put out when he even expressed, like, people were waiting for me to say something. And then the idea that, like, I didn't need to because the streets were. And I thought, like, right now, everybody feels the need to be saying something when you can't speak if you haven't listened and you don't understand what you're talking about. It's almost like there's that passage in Scripture where there was battle happening in Israel, and there was runners. The runners would take a message to the king, like, here's how the battle's going. And this one dude comes to the general and is like, let me run. And the general's like, it's not your turn. You don't even know what's been going on, but let me go. They let him go. He gets to King David. David says, what's the message? And the guy's like, I don't know. And you know what David said? Stand aside. I feel like that's a lot of what's happening right now. There's people that need to, like, stand aside because you weren't there to listen first. And then I think we can slow conversations down, learn to listen. And and I don't think we ever just learn to listen and then talk. I think it's listening, talking, listening, talking.
I'm glad you said that, because in my mind right now I'm thinking of, like, there's almost a risk in listening. What I mean is, like, there's this dynamic nature to relationships where I don't know what you're going to request of me or what you're going to share with me.
Right.
And if I'm truly seeking a fruitful relationship with you, I'm going to respond and mold my behavior accordingly based on what you tell me. So there's this unknown element of, like, when you come to me with something, I have to open myself up to all the possibilities of how I could fit myself into that.
Wow.
Do you see what I mean? It's a lot more, quote unquote, safe or self-preservative if I'm just waiting for you to finish some request so that I can give you all whatever I'm willing to give. You see what I mean? So I think that then that to me speaks to this difference between, are we after relationship or are we after solutions?
Exactly.
You see what I mean? Like, we can't solve whatever's going on.
Right.
We can relate to each other more honestly and better and more humbly. Yeah. Which then the issues are, it's almost like, it's like a couple that's really good at being in a relationship and both couples have issues. But the ones that have their relationship on better terms and they can they do that dance well together.
Right.
You know, of calling on each other, responding to each other, confiding in each other, trusting and
Yes.
being open and honest. Like those are the ones that obviously flourish, and those are the ones that last, because the unexpected events and things that come up aren't moments for them to derail. They're moments for them to recalibrate,
right, and realign to
and move on onto the better that's next. You know, so that's what I think of when you're talking about like that dynamic. Relationships are unexpected.
Yes.
You know, you have no idea, like Tim Keller talks about in the marriage books, you have no idea the person you're going to marry.
Right.
You don't even know him.
Nope.
And there's no way you can, because you guys are literally changing and molding just by being together every day.
Yep. Who that person is at the beginning is not who they'll be in 25 years.
So to me, almost listening falls in this idea of like being willing to listen. You're giving up a certain amount of control over where the relationship goes.
And isn't control, it's the issue. Because I have to and I was just thinking, you know, when you bring up Keller and you bring up marriage, you know, as a pastor, I do quite a bit of like marriage counseling, you know, and I've just over the years learned, like, the first question I ask them is, do you love each other? Do you want to fix this? Because if one party says no, we're done. And I almost feel like we could take a lot of that into what we're dealing with right now, where, and I want to give real honor and respect to the fact that, like, there's solutions being thrown out there right now. This would solve a problem. This would solve a problem. And me as an ignorant person is like, wait, slow down, because it's only because I haven't been thinking about it a long time. There's people who have spent their lifetimes, their life's work is invested into these solutions. Right. Nobody wanted to listen before. Now we're listening, and we could be like, well, slow down. But we're saying slow down because I'm not there yet.
We're not ready.
We're not ready. But I want to give respect to those that have been thinking about these things. Absolutely. And it's like, you've been focused on this where I have not been. And now is my time to, like, I got to listen. Right. And it's hard to listen without preconceived notions. It's hard to listen without already making up my mind. And I almost see, like, America is like a big marriage, you know, in the world. Like, relationships are a big marriage where I don't know what you're going to say. And this is what happens, though, is we begin to align ourselves with people who we know are going to be like-minded. Yeah. So then I won't be surprised by what you're going to say. I don't want, and I cut off those relationships that could, like, challenge me or take away the control that I'm used to having. Right.
And speak of that, excuse me, that control group, when you think about it in terms of like a privilege standpoint, the person that's in a position of privilege, maybe not this, you know, forceful overthrow type of privilege, but just by the nature of how you came to be in this time, if you're in that privilege group and your listening skills are not geared toward are not geared toward the relationship with anybody else. Yes. And they are going against maybe your view in the privilege group. I guess understanding in the privilege group, if you're not bent towards the other people that may not have the same privilege, you could just very unintentionally be pursuing the best for your majority group.
Yep. And not even know
for
that
your
you're,
power, your control group.
You think you're speaking for you, but you're really...
But it's very much just keeping the train moving.
Yeah. And even I want to just kind of mention right there, because... you know, the idea of trigger words, because privilege, it's a trigger word for a lot of, well, it's for white people in America, that's the trigger word. But privilege is and we're going to take a whole thing to just talk about that, because it's so important. And, but it's a part, and you mentioned it, it's a big part of our intercultural studies of power dynamics. And that is that in every relationship, there are power dynamics that occur. If you're in parts of the Middle East, I have power, you have power, our wives have power, but our wives, because of culture, have a lesser power dynamic. So if I truly want an equal parts marriage living in the Middle East, I, as a powerful man, as a man, I have to actually go lower in order to enable my wife to be. So it's not like, I can't treat this as we're equals, because that still doesn't give her the ability to move her, to move up, to be elevated. So that's really good. Power dynamics is a big part of, when we talk about privilege, we'll talk more about that. But I mention that because trigger words. Yeah. I hear a word like that. Now I'm just going to I'll use myself in that. You say privilege, and then I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Hold on. And you know what happens? I stop listening because I make assumptions of what you mean by that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I've heard other people talk about privilege, and I don't agree with them. And just the fact that you use the word,
It's over.
it's over.
Yeah, I guess if there's anything that would be awesome for this particular podcast, like this conversation that we're trying to have, it's not about, it's really just about presenting these ideas that contrast. You know, we're finding the break point between what we feel like God has clearly said he wants humanity and society to be like, and just what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, we are by no means trying to stoke the fire or, nothing along those lines. It's just, so that it can be on earth as it is in heaven.
Yes.
And there are clearly some points where that's misaligned.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what this spot is for. And so as far as these like trigger words, we have to think, I love this quote and I wish I knew who to give credit to, but it's offend the mind, reveal the heart. Right. And so you think about that moment when, and there's it could be the simplest thing that you learned about, riding your bike when you were a kid, or to things that we're talking about today. There's this moment of friction between new information that you receive and it, subconsciously hits all the things you've ever believed.
Yes.
And you feel this like tension, this literal physical, you could even, your mood can change when you get this hit to your consciousness. But those are the moments that we're after. And the key is not to accept everything blindly and just, it's new to me, I disagree, I'm supposed to just take it. Like, obviously not. But it is very much like biblically, it's like screening, taking every thought captive, giving it the opportunity to speak for what it's doing in your life. So giving it a chance to, okay, is this shedding light on something that I maybe have an incomplete view on, or
well, I think of like the Bereans in the book of Acts. It says that they heard Paul, and then they searched the scriptures to see if these things are true.
Exactly, right.
It's like, this is it. Like listen, but they listened without letting it turn them off.
Exactly.
They took it and said, okay, I'm offended.
So let me
Jesus
go see.
Cannot be the Messiah spoken of,
Yes.
And then they looked at the scriptures and he is.
That's exactly.
And it says they received gladly the words that he spoke.
Right. That's the heart of it right there, is just, letting these things that are going to rile us up, especially with the intensity around the discussions in the media and the news and everything. But as Christians, like helping our perspective, God's perspective, bring bring just our intensity level down enough to be able to see it for what it is as new information,
right? And
see if it matches up with what we believe about God's plan.
Yes,
that's all we're asking.
Good. Oh my goodness, that's so good. I was thinking, I wrote down a couple scriptures that I was going to read on the importance where the Bible tells us to listen. Jeremiah 33:3, call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. And I just think like, call to me, that's God listening to us, and I will answer you. That means I have to listen. So that the very essence of what it means to be in a relationship with God is that I share and he shares. And how many ugly Christian ideas exist because we've made a preconceived notion rather than I'm listening to God.
That's good.
I'm just making assumptions now. I love that one. Matthew 17:15. I love this one. Jesus took a few of his disciples up on the mountain, and it says that his glory was revealed. And Peter, it says he wanted to build tabernacles for, build one for Jesus and Moses and Elijah. And then we read this, a voice from heaven spoke. Matthew 17:5. This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. And I love this. You ready? Listen to him. It's like Moses is great, but he done. Elijah's great, but it's over. Just listen to my son. Like it's all turning us to listen to Jesus. And then James 1:19, maybe the focal verse for this podcast would be this. James 1:19. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. And I did just a quick, kind of jump into, what do these words mean? Because I think of swift, and I think just speed. Yeah. I think just speed. But a lot of, when I think of listening skills, speed is a part of the problem, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, I heard you. I got it. It's
Yeah.
quick. I'm quick about it. When the real issue, and I love that what the word swift means, is it means to be in a state of readiness. So it means that I enter into a conversation in a state of readiness to listen.
Yeah, that's good.
That I'm not just like, I need to say something, but I need to be ready to listen.
That's good too. You know, it makes me think, Phil, about this idea that, you know, like insights, like new insights.
Yeah.
If we do receive them, you know, say we are listening, we're open to change, and we do, you know, feel like we receive something that hit home for us. Those insights can sometimes be illusions to transformation. You know,
Wow.
they can make us think because of like they even have neurological support for you. When you hear something that makes you, you know, you believe something new, you automatically think now you're like that.
Right.
When really you haven't acted on any of that belief. And so I think
That's
as
so
far as
good.
that being ready, okay, now you're ready. Now you receive something new.
Right.
There's still more beyond that to get to that transformation point, or to that, that transformation process more so.
Because the illusion is that like, oh, you just told me something I've never heard. Check.
Got it.
And then now I'm like, I assume I've gotten it when
Right.
it's not been processed.
Exactly.
I haven't put it into my life. Wow.
Right. So that's a big one. And then also I think of just when you're bringing up like all the biblical points, I think the first point I think of is just more emphasis on like how key listening is, not just in relationship, but to our relationship with God, was when Paul talks about praying continually.
Yes.
Like how could you conceivably pray continually
Right.
and be talking all the time?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like praying
Right.
continually has to involve, I believe, like what you're talking about, like this being ready constantly for the next word that God wants to share with you, or the next instance that God wants to bring to your attention. You know, so praying continually very much, I would have to assume or
Definitely.
estimate is like 99% listening.
Yeah.
You know, like waiting, being ready,
And
for
like
that.
letting what God's doing around me be a part of my
Inform.
prayer life.
Exactly.
You know?
And
It's
then
powerful.
Also, I think about, you know, in terms of like when God is speaking to us. Like I remember when I was kind of like growing in my faith, and even just younger than that, I heard all the stuff, you know, the do's and like don't do this, do like, and I heard that almost in a way where like the church was telling that to society. But when I started reading the Bible for myself, I remember it hit me like a brick. I was like, wait a minute. All these do's and don'ts are for us.
Yeah.
You know, all these
He's not talking about
all these
the-
harsh
yeah.
harsh corrections are for the people in the church, or for God's people.
Yes.
Like all these things that sound completely, you know, super aggressive in terms of like, you need to fix this and do this. That's for us.
Yeah.
You know, so I think as again, listening to these conversations and things start to flare up and feel like they're piercing words, maybe they probably are. Yeah. You know, because if there's anybody charged with maturing and upgrading our conduct, it is believers.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and just like it wouldn't make sense for us to like give our life to Jesus, who's the perfecter of our faith, and him just be like, okay, great, you're done.
Right.
You know, like when we give our life to Jesus, it's for him to do something with it, for him to change it into his original plan for it.
Yes.
You know, his perfect version of it.
Wow.
So yeah, I think just in terms of absorbing these messages, understanding like some of the words may sound sharp, and like discipline, you know, and change is hard.
Yes.
You know, it's one of the hardest things that people always talk about, but discipline, I think, is even a step harder.
Oh, yeah.
It's this change under a regimen, change where you're signing up to be different. But the comfort we have, I think, is just in knowing who the perfecter of our faith is, and that he's a trustworthy teacher, he's a trustworthy quote unquote trainer, so that, you know, we can trust him in those weak spots.
Right.
You know.
And that's it. You're making such a valuable point of like, you know, and I just keep on that like offend the mind, reveal the heart kind of a thing, like where, especially as Christians, I mean, it hasn't happened in a long time now, but I remember when I first got saved, like in reading the Bible, and like I think I threw the Bible a couple times because I was mad. Like, what in the world? Like, that's not okay. Like, I don't like that. I don't like that that's being said. And then and it just reveals the heart.
Right.
And I think like in this moment, in the moment in history we're in, we need to exemplify, not as just an example, but truly absorb these, not the illusions of transformation, but actual transformation. Like we believe that we are, I mean, I hear this in church all the time. We're a work in progress, right? You always hear that, churches. We're a work in progress. Do we really believe that? Because right now we're faced with a dilemma of, that is not just trigger words. We're faced with the dilemma of like, there's been a large group of people who feel, not just by feeling, but by fact, pushed out, held down. And this is that's what we believe as Christians, that all of us were broken and lost and in darkness and blind and dead. And then Christ came in and brought light and hope and life. And but we kind of have the illusion of like, oh, I got that.
Right.
Rather than I'm still broken. I still need to learn and grow. Paul says it so well when he says, I have not yet arrived. Nor have I yet attained for that which I have been grabbed hold of. Right. And I need to see that for my own self. And listening is a huge skill for that. Right. And it is a skill. Would you not agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
You grow in that.
Yeah, it's just like any other, like you said, it's just a skill. You work at it. And I think it becomes almost addictive when you see the benefits of it.
Yes.
There's nothing like, again, when you go to the marriage example, like when, a lot of times when Joy is coming to tell you stuff or when Anna Marie's coming to tell me stuff, it's not so that I can tell her anything. She just wants to be heard.
Man, I wish I'd learned that one earlier.
How
long did it take you into marriage to learn that one?
I heard it from somebody first. So,
yeah, exactly.
But it's just this idea like,
so true.
It serves so much in a relationship when you can just listen and that be it.
And we see it with our kids too. It's like sometimes they just need to be, they don't feel heard, so they say what they got to say in ways that are not. And that's the world we're living in right now. People are saying things, and I think people that are hurt people hurt people.
Correct.
And there's a lot of hurting going on, and it's for all of us to be like, I'm not going to let that hurt. I'm gonna hold that off, but I'm going to hear what they're saying. I'm going to listen to what they're saying. We talked about some of the benefits here, and we're going to wrap up in a minute or so, but that learning to listen is a gift. It's a gift to myself. I think it's a gift to myself because I'm shedding the illusion of transformation and I'm embracing transformation. So it's a real gift to my own life,
Yeah, that's good.
Relationships get developed, and relationships take time. But even in that, I think that a lot of the time could probably be cut down if we were listening in that process.
Right. And think about too, like just what you're talking about in James, like would it be a bigger problem for a relationship of people like that were only talking and couldn't listen?
Right.
Or people that could only listen?
And we talked about that earlier. We didn't do this on that. Let's do it right here because it's so critical. That slow to speak, the word used is not about like, speed. It's literally the word like to be dumb, to be, or mute almost. And you brought you brought this.
Yeah, it's just
share
like,
that because it's so cool.
It hit me when I was reading that because I had never known that, the original idea.
Yeah.
And you think of like not being able to speak as this is a handicap.
Right.
This person is debilitated somehow. But I'm pretty sure that most people would agree the people that cannot listen are the hardest people, that have the hardest time, that are the hardest people to be around. And so, which one really holds us back more?
Right.
It's really interesting to think of it that way. Because, you think of even just situations that you find yourself in. Like one way we were talking about it was if you do a good job listening on the front end, if you listen your way in, or rather if you don't listen your way in, you're probably going to have to talk yourself out of a mess.
Ooh, that's so good.
It's just like...
Say that again. Wait, that was
if
cool.
Let's see if I can repeat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If not,
if you don't listen your way in, you're probably going to have to talk yourself out of a mess.
Oh my gosh, I've done that a million times.
Everybody, it's just what we do. That's what we do.
It describes so much of my life.
You're welcome.
All makes sense
You're
now.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I love that because I think that these things play into so many parts of our lives. We're focused on an issue of race and two different groups of people, and there's multiple different groups of people, but learning how to talk to each other. And, sure, we could talk about like, hey, people need to learn to say things the right way. Yeah, that's an important skill. But listening covers all of that.
Because also, how many times do we see Jesus' example of hearing words, but hearing what's really being said?
Exactly.
So there's one thing about the person, you have the responsibility to communicate your thought. but there's something about the way I view that person in love that helps me hear what they're really saying.
Yes.
That keeps the conversation productive. Wow. What conversation is productive where no ideas have been understood between the two people.
Just hearing, but no listening. Ooh, I love this. Man, this has been amazing. Great episode on listening. Thanks for coming and doing this. My pleasure. Those of you that were with us this whole time, thanks so much for being a part of it. And we're looking forward to you joining us in the next episode. Take care.